Welcome to this episode of the Virulent Vortex, a podcast in which we discuss infectious diseases across scales, from pathogens and molecules to populations and pandemics and everything in between. My name is Jaap de Rode. I'm a professor of biology here at Emory University and today's host of this show. With me today is Professor Katia Koelle, who is also a professor of biology here at Emory. Katia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jaap.
So, Katia, you have been studying infectious diseases for quite a while. And so maybe you can talk us a little bit about the things you have done. And I know we're going to talk about flu and swine flu and pandemics, but maybe talk to us a little bit about how you got there.
Sure. Let's see. I started working on viruses when I was a postdoc at the Pennsylvania State University. And I became very interested in looking to see kind of how they change over time genetically, how viral populations change genetically over time. So how they evolve. And then how we can use viral sequences to actually understand the spread of viruses also. How do they spread from one region to another, and why are they changing genetically as they're changing when you see them change?
So we talked a little bit about SARS-CoV-2. You know, we have talked about it a lot in other episodes as well. It's a pandemic, but there are other pandemics. So let's talk about some other pandemics.
Okay. The most well-known other non-SARS-CoV-2 pandemics have been flu pandemics in the 21st century and also in the 20th century. And so the most recent flu pandemic occurred in 2009. I'm sure maybe you remember it.
I do remember it.
There was not as severe lockdowns as there was for SARS-CoV-2.
No, but we had a dorm set up here on campus for all the students that got it, and they had to be quarantined.
Oh, is that right?
When we were teaching classes, a lot of students were missing at any one time.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah.
So 2009 was the most recent flu pandemic. And of course, now we're very much worried about highly pathogenic avian influenza spilling over into humans as it's spilled over into other hosts like some marine mammals, for example, where we're seeing kind of quite a bit of mortality there.
So let me just stop you there. So spillover is when viruses jump from one species to another. And so it can jump from birds to humans. But you just said marine mammals?
Yeah. So we're seeing that not in research that I'm particularly involved in, but other people actually on Emory campus have been looking at spillover of these highly pathogenic avian influenza strains into marine mammals, for example, like sea lions, and it's causing into other hosts as well. And causing really kind of neurological symptoms and causing massive levels of mortality in some of these other hosts.
Yeah, so sea lions like us, if they have a severe infection, they can actually die of flu.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the most recent pandemic was swine flu, 2009. Have there been no other ones?
There have been several before that. So this has been in the 20th century. There was one in 1968 with H3N2 came to the human population. It also came from pigs. Then there was a previous H2N2 one, and when H3N2 came into the population in 1968, it replaced H2N2. And H2N2 actually replaced the preceding H1N1, which came into the population in 1918.
Oh, okay. So are these flu pandemics, are they always coming from pigs, or can they come from birds as well?
So the ones that have been very well documented, and especially the 2009 one, there's evidence, very strong evidence that it's come from pigs. And pigs are what are considered really important mixing vessels. The patterns are very, very similar between pigs and humans, which indicates that there's nothing specifically about kind of the pig as a host, that's really allowing the virus to kind of adapt really quickly or anything like that. But it seems like it underscores the importance of the ecological interactions, the environment, how close these pigs are being kept, that they're being exposed to multiple subtypes. And so really underscoring the importance of kind of the ecological conditions of the pigs in terms of becoming these mixing vessels.
Yeah, so because on the one hand, you said that pigs are these mixing vessels where you get these new variants arising, but on the other hand, pigs are just like us. So is it that the pigs interact more with birds than we do? So do they encounter different viruses more often than we do?
So that's a really good point. So I think, if you're thinking about kind of one subtype kind of circulating in the population, like H3N2, which is what we looked at, one of the viruses that we looked at. The patterns of pigs that are, singly infected with H3N2, so got exposed, and then you can look at what happens to that viral population within that pig. That looks very much like a human infection. Now, another subtype can kind of come in, right? And that subtype might be an avian, influenza virus, right? And it might not be able to infect a human, but it would be able to infect the pig, and then those dynamics within the pigs would probably look very similar to also, again, what a human influenza virus infection would look like.
Yeah. All right. So with all of that, so how are we going to stop the next flu pandemic? Or prevent it, I should say.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's, so with respect to swine populations, there's of course, increasing surveillance, right? And ideally kind of seeing whether there's, new resorts arising, on a pig farm, for example, to try to catch, strains early, right? Highly transmissible strains, early.
Yeah.
I think that's very difficult to do just because, you can only do so much surveillance, right?
And there are a lot of pigs.
Yes, and there are a lot of pigs. So I think, through potentially some, some changes in kind of, structure of the way kind of, livestock raising kind of is done, for example, that might be helpful, right? Pigs are currently being vaccinated, oftentimes, so that might help, but it probably can only help so much.
Yeah.
We can probably all decrease our pig consumption.
So eat less meat. Yeah. How about keeping birds away from the pigs? Is that something that seems pretty straightforward? Well, maybe not if you keep your pigs outside. But
yeah. I think that's a really good point. And depending on kind of the size of the pig operation and so forth, there's different risks, right, in terms of exposure to avian populations. Yeah. And then there's always the risk of actually the next flu pandemic coming directly, from birds. That is also kind of a possibility that people are concerned with. Yeah. Although there hasn't been that much kind of precedence, for that happening. But now it's happening, for example, again, with these highly pathogenic avian influenza.
Okay. So it can happen, but it's more often pigs.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. So flu can come from birds, but we're more concerned about pigs. This has been very illuminating. Thank you so much for talking to us about flu and your research today. We want to thank you for watching this episode, and we hope to see you again.